Why didn't Dimebag Darrell join Megadeth when Dave Mustaine offered? Dave Mustaine once offered Dimebag Darrell to join Megadeth, but he didn't accept because he couldn't bring his brother along, drummer Vinnie Paul. Back in the late 80s, during a time when all things So Far So Good So What were just about over with and sights were set on a new album, Dave Mustaine was in search of a new guitarist. He had dismissed Jeff Young in part for allegedly having contemplated putting the moves on Diana, Dave's fiancée at the time. Chuck Baylor had also been dismissed, but already replaced with Nick Menza, partly for having substance abuse issues. Among the other reasons for their dismissal were their inability to improvise, adapt, and overcome. As Dave Mustaine once explained, quote, "I just couldn't live with those guys anymore. There were personality problems and chemical problems. They had an inability to adapt. I'm kind of a chameleon when it comes to getting acclimated to different environments, and those guys had a hard time dealing with people, places, and things." Unquote. So, having turned the page, auditions were full speed ahead. At some point in the process, during which, according to David Ellefson, they auditioned like a dozen guys and none of them were at all in the realm, Ellefson himself suggested Dimebag Darrell to Dave Mustaine. Ellefson had gotten to know Darrell and thought he was an amazing player, so Mustaine reached out. Pantera had just released their fourth studio album, Power Metal. It was their first album with vocalist Phil Anselmo, and it was the record that began their shift in a heavier direction. LA Weekly called it one of Pantera's best albums, a solid album of 1980s speed metal. Despite this, Darrell seemed interested in Dave Mustaine's proposition. However, he and his brother were a package deal, and if Darrell was to join Megadeth, his brother, Vinnie Paul, would have to come along. Mustaine did not oppose Vinnie's presence in the deal until he learned what his instrument was. According to Mustaine, quote, he goes, "Can I bring my brother?" And I went, "Who's your brother?" He goes, "Vinnie Paul." And I went, "Sure, what does he do?" And he goes, "He's a drummer." And I went, "We already have a drummer." Unquote. As per Mustaine's recollection, Nick Menza had already been hired, therefore Vinnie was not needed. David Ellefson recalls, quote, "Fast forward to January of '89. At this point, Jeff Young is out of Megadeth, Chuck Baylor is still our drummer. We didn't need a drummer. Even though we would replace Chuck with Nick, we didn't need a drummer at this time." Unquote. Whatever the circumstances were, the fact was that Megadeth only needed a guitarist. For Dimebag Darrell, this was a deal breaker. He was to go nowhere without his brother. According to Ellefson, Darrell responded, quote, "Look, huge honor, but with me would come my brother. We've got our band, Pantera." Unquote. As Dave Mustaine put it, that was the end of MegaterA. It is needless to say that this all turned out the best way possible. We would not have had Pantera, at least not the Pantera that we've come to know and love, I think, if Darrell had accepted the deal. The same, what if Dave Mustaine had never been fired from Metallica, or what if Kerry King would have joined Megadeth? Conversations can be had about this, and I think we're all better for how each of those situations turned out. Thank you for listening and for sharing this time with us. Delving into the history of a band we love so much is a joyous event, and having you here to experience it too makes it even more so. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe, comment, and share. There are many more stories on the way. Stay tuned, and I'll see you soon.